Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about an interesting healing modality simply known as quantum touch healing. Joining us on the program today to tell us about this is our guest, Ms. Judy Marin-Friend. Judy, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, Dan, for giving me the opportunity to share. I really appreciate it.
Well, we like people who come on the air and share with us. Now, tell us how you started getting into this particular healing modality.
Ooh, the short version or the long version?
Well, whichever one suits our listeners so they become interested.
Well, I'll try to give you a shortened version of the long version because it really is what did get me started. And that was many years ago, back in the 70s. So we know how old I am at least. And I was really struggling with a physical condition at the time and had spent a great deal of money seeing many, many different medical specialists, 13 to be exact. And the condition went from being an acute condition to chronic, and we were getting nowhere fast, as they say. And when we got to the point where the last doctor I saw said, well, why don't we just do some surgery and remove some of those parts that are bothering you, and then you won't have to worry about this again. I said, okay, that's it. I give up. And I threw my hands in the air and said, I'm either going to be unhealthy the rest of my life or I'm going to die from whatever this is. And interestingly enough, as can often be the case in surrendering, I was introduced very quickly to a rather gifted homeopathic physician who opened my eyes to another way. And from that point on, I went in exploration of as many other ways as I could find and ended up here doing energy therapies, which have proven to be phenomenally effective for me and my students. So that's pretty much what got me on the path.
Now, Judy, tell us about what this quantum touch healing is. How was it developed?
Well, there was actually a gentleman in the Southern California area, actually around Santa Cruz, by the name of Bob Rasmussen, who had a rather life-altering experience and was visited, as he said, while he was in a coma by what he felt was some sort of cosmic tribunal. It was strange for him because he was a rather practical man, so to be visited in such a way, he kind of just shrugged off. But when he came out of the coma, he came out with the message from these folks in this tribunal that said, we'd like you to live at least one lifetime past your 40s. And so when he came back, they said, you have a lot of work to do, and we want you to get busy. Well, he had no idea what any of that meant. He thought he was going a little insane. But when he did come back, he had the opportunity one day, while he was working with a woman, I believe, doing some sort of physical therapy with her. Her daughter accompanied her on this trip. And when he saw her, he noticed that she had severely, severely bowed legs and asked her mother if she wouldn't mind if he touched her on the outsides of her knees. And she said, well, of course. Well, he did this, and when he did this, he was compelled to do what basically is the quantum touch technique. And within a 30-minute period, her legs completely straightened out.
Oh.
And so one of his young disciples at the time, a man by the name of Richard Gordon, learned this technique from Bob Rasmussen and developed it into the technique that I teach today, as well as many other instructors around the world now. So it's become very popular because of its effectiveness and its ability to treat pretty much everything.
Now, do people, I guess, in the medical community take a look at this and say, this is kind of a little bit of nonsense here? I mean, you tend to hear that, but
right.
I always take the position on the program to say, well, is it effective? Is it getting results? That, to me, seems to be really the order of the day.
Exactly. and which is exactly why I, said to the medical profession at my particular experience that I had this many years ago, I gave you your chance. I gave your 13 specialists thousands of dollars, and what did it do? It got me nowhere. And when I learned this and started applying it, I can tell you through my own personal experience and experiences of my students and some of my peers that are also quantum touch practitioners and or instructors, that we have treated and alleviated conditions, everything from scoliosis, diabetes, leukemia, bone fractures, hip degeneration, pancreas cancer, breast cancer, lymphoma, the list goes on. And one thing that I find really fascinating, very helpful for people that are first learning something like this that seems really, really far away from what their belief systems are able to embrace. When you have an emergency, either a medical emergency or some sort of first aid need, it's phenomenally effective for things like burns and cuts to stop the bleeding and alleviate the pain. In fact, completely diminish any sign of a burn. I have so many stories I can tell you, and I know we don't have that much time. But one I would like to share with you was when my husband and I first met. I had just learned quantum touch. I had just been trained by Richard Gordon. At that time, he was still here in California, but now I believe their main headquarters is in Hawaii. But he was teaching out of Santa Cruz when I learned. At the time, my husband was experiencing severe back pain, and he confessed to me that when he was 10 years old, he fell on the ice. He's from Wisconsin, and they think fractured some vertebrae. They didn't know for sure. And so I began to work on him, and the symptoms were abated very quickly. But if any of you folks out there are listening know anything about homeopathy, you also probably aware of the tenet called Hering's Law. And what Hering's Law pretty much loosely explains to us is how the body heals. And it heals in a very, very pragmatic progression, and always pretty much the same, from the top down, from deep within or the greater organs outward to the lesser organs, and from where you are at this current moment in time, back through the point of origin of your condition until you're on the other side of that point of origin, seemingly not having had the condition at all at that point. So as I worked on my husband over the next probably 2 months off and on, we could see Hering's Law in action. I watched it. I watched it unfold as we went back through where he is right now, where he was at that particular time, rather, back through to the point of origin, which was the granddaddy episode that he had while I was working on him that put him into bed for 2 days, which made me a little nervous. But the good news was, at the end of 2 days, he jumped out of bed, and he hasn't looked back since, and that's been 10 years.
Wow.
And that was a condition that he had lived with from the time he was 10 years old to the time he was 49. And he just turned 59 yesterday, and I have not had to work on his back in the past 10 years.
Wow.
So doctors know a great deal about the biology and the chemistry of what we are, but they know very little about that spark, that energy that animates all of this biology until we get close to death, when they hook us up to all these very expensive pieces of equipment like EKGs and EEGs, which measure that electricity or that current running through our body so that they can tell us whether we're still alive or dead, but they don't know what to do with it other than that, pretty much. So what energy workers learn to do is to trust a lot, basically. There's a lot of trust involved, and there's a lot of taking your belief system and suspending them for a moment until you can get into becoming very aware of that part of you that's always operating in the background, and getting quiet and doing the techniques that you learn in this class help you to get in touch with that part of yourself. And it's really, it's such a wonderful thing to watch people awaken to this part of themselves that has seemingly been dormant for such a long time.
Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting when you talk about belief systems is you take a look at this day and age, for instance, cancer. This was something that I remember back in the early 70s. My mother was describing a story that became a movie, and it was about a lady who had died of cancer, and I thought, well, what's this cancer business? And, it was barely on the horizon then. I mean, It was there, but it was barely there. Now it's part of mainstream conversation. It's everywhere. It's like an infestation. And what I find interesting about that is it's just like diabetes is, 1 in 3 people in America are going to get diabetes. Well, gee whiz, with those statistics, I stand a really good chance at getting diabetes. And I'm starting to think, well, is somebody out there building a belief system that makes us believe that this is going to happen to us, that it's a course of action that's unavoidable?
I think there's something
it's
very
just a way
real
of looking at it.
Exactly, because your thoughts are very real things, and they do create an energy dynamic. And first you think it, then you say it, and then you do it. Mm-hmm. And people do so much of that. So there is a great deal of that very thought that you just expressed that contributes dramatically. I mean, the medical profession, if you spend a lot of time going to doctors, they don't talk to you about how to maintain your health. They talk to you about the inevitability of what kind of disease you're likely to get. And that sets you up to an expectation. So when you plant those seeds, we have to we have to reharvest that stuff. We have to dig those seeds up and plant new ones. And once you're able to grasp that new concept, and in my case, I was faced with something that could have been potentially life-threatening those many years ago, and I look at it now as a blessing for me, because even though it was very painful, both physically and emotionally and financially, it was a hard lesson, but it was one I learned very well. And there are so many more things that are operating in this amazing universe in which we reside that are unseen by these eyes of ours, this physical part of ourselves. And this is what we're now just starting to learn, is to trust that part of ourselves that has always been operating in the background. I mean, people like Wayne Dyer, I know many of your listeners are very familiar with Wayne Dyer, and he likes to say, and he's right, that we're not physical beings having a spiritual experience, although some people live their lives that way. We truly are spiritual beings first, having a physical experience. This is not the chicken or the egg. We know very much that we came from spirit, and the physical manifests from the spirit, and you can see it again and again if you give it a chance. If you shift your thinking just 45 degrees, your world can change dramatically.
Well, here's another scenario, too, for the listeners to kind of chew on as well when we talk about beliefs. You get people who smoke, or you get people who drink. They live these loose lifestyles where, they're partying a lot. You get some people, they're going to die in their 20s doing this. They say, well, it was because of this, And then you get some people who live to be 100 that were doing the same thing year after year for 100 years. Well, not 100 years anyway. That'd be kind of sad,
for a long time. Yes.
But the point is how can you say that lifestyle contributed to the death, when these people are living this long doing the same thing that other people are doing? What is it really? I mean, it's a way of looking at it.
If you look at the statistics, however, sadly, I hate to be the bearer of practical news here, but if you do look at the statistics, there are very few people that fall in that latter category, living to 90 or 100 years and doing all those negative things. Very few. And likely those people were people who weren't smoking or drinking to hide from something or suppress something that's going on in their lives or their bodies or their experience in life, which is what many people do when they party, like you mentioned. So those people that those few people that can do all those things and live into their hundreds are just completely absorbed in living and life without hiding or suppressing emotional problems, which, by the way, is an underlying factor in pretty much every condition I've ever worked on with every person that I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
There is an underlying emotional stressor. So our thoughts and what we hold to be real bears real evidence in the physical form, showing up either in a diseased state or a condition that will not let go, a chronic condition that will not let go. So we have to look at what we're not willing to let go of or what we're hiding or suppressing. And that comes up when you use energy work, because everything in the universe is dancing to this lovely little vibration called resonance. And this is what we use in quantum touch to get to that state that will afford the subject a healing environment. So whether it's mental, emotional, or physical, everything will respond to that.
I know that we have a friend of ours that is involved in energy healing. She's a Native American, and she has been treating people, in some cases, with fairly late stages of cancer, as I understand. I don't know that as a fact, but and has been turning these things around. I mean, these are people that normally would probably be jumping into the chemotherapy or the radiation therapy modality to take care of business, but they're not. They said, this is a different direction I want to go, and she's reversing this. And now she's starting to get more and more work. It's keeping her busy, in other words, because she's, by word of mouth, people are saying, hey, something's going on over here. But it's really amazing that you've got this non-invasive practice that you have here that has had what would be considered extreme results. I mean, come on, you go and you touch somebody. I mean, that's almost like faith healing here, isn't it?
Well, exactly. But again, being that everything is in motion at a subatomic level, everything's vibrating at a subatomic level, what one learns to do, and hers is likely more instinctual or based on her spiritual belief. She probably comes from her heart center very much, which, by the way, the heart chakra, that heart center in the body, the heart itself, generates an energy field that's 60 times stronger, larger, more dynamic than what the brain generates. That's not 6 times, that's 60 times larger than what the brain generates. It has more neural pathways. But where do we make all of our decisions from? Most of us.
Yeah, usually from the head.
And this is why the Native Americans have such a powerful ability to do this, because they understand this already, that coming from your power means coming from your heart, not coming from your head. But that whole idea of things being in motion, things vibrating at a subatomic level, with the quantum touch concept is that 3 things will happen when a practitioner generates this energy field, which is higher frequency. Either the subject their energy field will either drop to a lower frequency, it will raise to the higher frequency, or these 2 fields meet somewhere in the middle. And what we've seen time and again with this work is that the dominant frequency field will always prevail. And through this innate intelligence, I mean, energy is not encapsulated in the body. You can see this. There's lots of scientific evidence, lots of measuring devices that can show you that this energy is not contained. And so this energy can interact between 2 people, 10 people, thousands of people. But when it's focused between 2 people, the entrainment process occurs, which merely means that the lesser frequency field will match the dominant frequency field, which in this case is always the practitioner, and I haven't seen it fail. So once that happens, and once the subject's body is now revved up to a higher frequency pitch, those denser frequencies have that ability to move out, or a chaos of sorts ensues. And then once that chaos is removed, the body has a code, and again, science will tell you this, then that code is to always right itself, always go back to that zero point, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and reorganize the way it was intended to. And once it does that, healing occurs. And the only variable seems to be, in my experience, time, the time it takes for each individual to heal. But I can tell you that in every case, I've seen changes and noticed the healing process be dramatically expedited,
Mm-hmm.
in some cases after one session. It's, in my personal experience, it usually takes multiple sessions, but you can see crazy things happen very rapidly.
Now, Judy, this is interesting as you talk about energy and energy in motion. As you said, it's not something that's static. It doesn't just sit there.
Exactly.
Okay? So let's talk about what the energy is or how it vibrates with a sick condition, I guess. Call it sick energy, if you will. What does that look like?
That's much denser. That's lower frequency.
Okay.
Slow. High frequency is good. Low or slow or dense frequency, not so good.
Mm-hmm.
And so when things are revved, when a car is running, when those RPMs are up there, that car's got power, right?
Right.
When the RPMs are low, it's at an idle state or inactive or not in motion. So higher is always better. Lower implies dense frequencies. And that goes for everything across the board, including our food.
Mm-hmm.
So when people talk about, nutrition and all that, there's a very easy rule of thumb for that. Just look at how much food you're putting in your body that's alive or close to living, that has that life force in it. Everything has the life force. This is what's keeping us alive and having this conversation now.
Mm-hmm.
But our country and those incidents that you talked about of diabetes and cancer and things that are off the charts is because if you really look at what we've done to our food, most people put things in their body that haven't resembled life in a long time. In some cases,
that's true.
Maybe ever.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're starting to see, if you even watch television, that the doctors and commercials are starting to say you need to have 5 to 10 pieces of fruits and vegetables a day. Yeah, that just makes total sense. And we're not talking about a can of peaches. We're talking about something that hasn't gone through the processing process, because it's like treating like, if you will, to go back to homeopathy. You're putting living things in a living being, and you will get more life out of that than you will something that is not alive any longer or that has been over-processed into something that's now pure chemistry.
Now, Judy, tell us how long you've been actually in practice doing quantum touch healing.
Well, officially, it's been, as a certified practitioner, it's going on 9 years.
Wow.
But unofficially, I've been dabbling in it for more like 11. And then I said, well, this is silly. I want to do this, so I'm going to become official, because I believe in honoring and respecting the integrity of a process. So I wanted to learn from the originator, and I did, and I'm glad that I did. And the education continues. What I have learned, what I will say, though, is that the more energy therapies that I study and learn, the more I'm seeing that they're basically all saying the same thing. It's just like another language. It's like we're all human beings on this planet, but some speak English, some speak Spanish, some speak Russian, and so on. It's just a different approach or perspective of what, in many cases, you can see very strong similarities that run through every one of these practices. The reason I gravitated towards quantum touches, it was the simplest, most basic one to learn, and it is effective. It is as effective as any other that I've practiced or learned, provided you do it. You have to do it for it to be effective. So, my former life was in the graphics industry, where I was a designer and creative director, and along with learning all these other things while I was earning a living, so to speak, with that other, I was doing what was really nearest and dearest to my heart, and that is these forms of energy therapies. And complementary or alternative healing practices. And so at one point I said, okay, I'm done with that. This is what I really want to be doing, and shifted over into this. And I'm very glad that I have.
Now, here's an interesting, question, I believe, for our listeners is, as you practice this on someone, what do you experience?
A very good question, because both will experience a healing. And as a practitioner, I never really know where that healing is going to occur, but the energy knows. There's a divine wisdom in this energy, an innate intelligence, if you will. And so it knows where it's needed most, because this energy is present in every particle of the body, down to the DNA. In fact, the DNA has intelligence. And so when you're working with another individual, you can feel all sorts of things, but you will most definitely experience some sort of healing, whether it's emotional, physical, it doesn't really much matter. If there is no imminent need for a healing, then usually I just notice different sensations in my hands. Sometimes I get insights, intuitive insights that cause me to ask questions of the subject. So it can be an array of things, but the thing that all practitioners notice is some sort of feeling that's not usual in their hands. Warmth, tingling, heaviness, coldness. It can be a vast array of sensations, because everyone will feel these sensations uniquely to their own particular experience.
Have you ever had anybody during a session spontaneously shoot out an experience or a truth that
Yes.
they even didn't expect, and what was that like?
Yes, and that's very common as well, because
So they start admitting things, those skeletons, they come roaring out of the closet, I guess.
yes, and this is all part of the healing process.
Mm-hmm.
Often when, for instance, when I was working on myself at one time, this is best explained because I lived the experience. I also had a back problem from the time I was 18 and spent years going to chiropractors where it would be resolved, and then a year later I'm back there. I mean, this went on forever, and this isn't healing. This is an addiction now, so something's wrong.
Exactly. Well, no, it's actually a career move, really, for the chiropractor.
Yes. But there was no other place I could get any relief at that point in time until I discovered that there's a better way with the energy therapy. And what I noticed is I said, okay, if this is going to work, I'm going to use myself as guinea pig if I'm going to be really convinced about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I started working on myself, even though I wasn't having any real back pain at the time. And every morning when I would get up, I'd run energy down my spine, the way you learn in class. And after about 2.5 months, a week had gone by where I had completely forgotten to run energy on my back, and it hit me one day. Oh, my gosh, I'd not done this. But it also hit me that when that frequency of the condition has been moved out, the memory of all of that will go with it. And listen, somebody has to remind me that I've had back problems, and I go, yeah, I remember I used to walk, kind of do the crab walk, I used to call it. And but I can't remember that pain anymore. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what that was about. And often with healings, all things that have been pushed down, because we're very good at a lot of things, pushing down, avoiding, denying, even expressing, but we haven't learned until this energy stuff about releasing those things. And so it's very common when you get down to that level of your beingness, which is the wave level of what we are, or the energy level of what we are, and you start aligning that, you start getting that rev to where it's supposed to be for you, then all the stuff that's in the way of that natural, wonderful, undulating wave that makes you who you are, that stuff has to get out of the way. And yes, it can come out in really surprising ways. And you just do your best to hold a safe feeling space for that individual and allow them to have their experience. I have not lost one person doing quantum touch on them yet.
Well, that's a relief. I know it wasn't too long ago I decided to take a trip downtown by bus, and just so happened the bus driver and a passenger who was sitting toward the front, who had bags and bags of stuff laying on seats, mostly diabetic stuff, so I could tell she must be diabetic. And along the way on this 10-minute ride, all they were talking about was cancer. Apparently there was the bus driver was treated for cancer, but what I found, I guess a little aggravating, first of all, was probably just the conversation, that it was loud enough for the whole bus to listen to, but, it was their story. But the thing is the way they went about having it treated. It was about chemotherapy.
Yeah.
And I thought, doesn't anybody ever want to approach it differently? Because I know that about a year ago we had Suzanne Summers on our program, and the doctor said, this is the way we're going to go about treating you, and she said, I'd rather just die.
That's right. I would do the same thing.
I know I would. I mean, because to me, it sucks the life out of you, from what I understand. And it's not really all that successful, really.
No,
when you take a look at the percentage rate,
exactly.
It's not successful at all, really.
No.
And what was interesting, if I may, is that she was on Larry King to basically talk about her book, which I believe was Knockout.
Yes.
And she brought on two of the doctors she had featured in the book that were showing alternative approaches to healing cancer. And they decided, whoever they are, maybe it was the network, to bring on two doctors to refute what these other two had to say. And, she had her own thing to say about these two doctors, but I said, what's even more interesting? Nobody ever thought to ask, but is this effective? Isn't that what we're looking for?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I do what I do, because those same doctors, those allopathic physicians, did nothing for me. And I didn't go to the same one over and over again. Mm-hmm. I went to 13.
Wow.
And not one of them.
13 different opinions.
13 different doctors. So I said, okay, I'm either going to be stupid and keep banging my head against this wall until it's bloody, and by the way, it was pretty close to that by then, or I'm going to listen to this little voice that was in my head, which, at that point I thought I was going insane, that was saying there has to be another way. And, I mean, look at this, for example. Look at the Eastern cultures. Just take the Chinese as one example. Now, they have been practicing the healing arts for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Western medicine is what? A couple of 100 years old? Right around when the industrial age became really into full thrust. So I really think that we need to take a look at the wholeness of what we are, not the fragments of what we are. Mm-hmm. And that's something that Western medicine doesn't do. And, at the risk of sounding cynical, because I am in some cases, there's a huge lobby behind these doctors, and it's called the pharmaceutical marketplace. And those people, the pharmaceutical industry has billions of dollars to lose if we all get healthy. And we could do another whole show on my feelings about this quote-unquote health reform, because there's nothing that's been reformed about it at all. It's just a new way for the same guys to get their money.
Yeah,
nobody is getting any kind of options for their health. Mm-hmm. So I'll stop right there. And I feel for Suzanne Summers, because now she's made out to be this crazy Hollywood type who's just out there. But
I don't know, because there's something about her book. First of all, it hit the New York Times #1 bestseller list before its debut. So a lot of people out there are saying we're more interested in what the hell we can do than the conventional way things have been done. So
exactly.
That's the thing.
There are more people out there like me who are going through the situation that I went through and saying, okay, there has to be another way. We've tried this way, and we're not getting better, so there's got to be another way. In fact, I have a lady that's going to take my class, this upcoming class that's on the 26th and 27th, by the way, of this month. I still have plenty of room.
For those of you that are in the Portland, Oregon area.
Yes, or even Vancouver. I get a lot of folks that come down from Washington as well.
Okay.
But this lady stopped in because her doctor, her MD, she said to her, listen, the woman that came to see me, who, by the way, is 85 years old, and said to her doctor, "You've got to tell me how I can help this more esoteric part of myself. This isn't helping. I'm not going to suck down steroids. I won't do that." And so the doctor directed her to me. So I said, "Well, you need to call this woman and thank her. She at least had the presence of mind to say, okay, if this woman really wants to do something different, I'll help her, instead of poo-pooing something that she's not maybe totally aligned with." So I was really impressed by that. And I'm even more impressed that this woman who's 85 years old has decided, I'm going to look into this. I know I'm stronger than this, and I know that there is something else that I can do to help my overall health. So I was really proud to see that in her.
Mm-hmm. And, in defense of doctors, too, they mean well. I mean, that's what they're in the business to do. And they, for the most part, believe that when they're telling you, this is basically how it's going, whatever the reason you are in the hospital, especially if it is a cancer, I guess a chronic or terminal illness, you probably got about 2 or 3 more months to live. See, you begin believing that.
That's right.
And it's like they don't mean to, but
no, that's
they're
what they
taking your hope away, is basically what it comes down to.
Right, and this is the way they were trained. This is what they know. And like you said, I believe doctors, generally, like all people, are inherently good, and they want to help people generally. It's just that whole medical paradigm needs a really big overhaul. And to this day, and I believe I'm accurate in this, I'm sure somebody will call and correct me, but I believe that doctors are only given about 1,000 hours, and all of those years that they have to study to become an MD, they're only offered 1,000 hours as an elective towards something else. Included in that would be nutrition, for instance. And so their whole focus is on anything but the maintenance of health. It's pretty much damage control. And most of those doctors, what they do with the extra 1,000 hours, is they usually apply it toward whatever their specialization might be, whether it's cardiology or
plastic surgery.
Yes, immunology, whatever it might be, exactly. So that's the way the medical system is set up, and it's starting to loosen up. It's starting to open up a little by little. Just for me, for anxious people like myself, not fast enough.
Understood. For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with Ms. Judy Marin-Friend. She is a natural quantum touch healer. Now, Judy, you were saying earlier that as you started doing this, you began that you could actually work on yourself. So it sounds like this isn't one of those talents or gifts that somebody just gets divined with, that it's really in all of us. So
Absolutely.
This is something that's a learned skill, and as people learn this skill, do they find that they become healthier?
Yes, I noticed it with me. In some cases also, and this should not deter folks from going down the road, but if you've had chronic conditions for a long time, in the beginning you may appear to be getting a little worse, because those things are coming up to move out, and as they do, it can get rocky, much like what my husband went through when we were working on his back. We started off slowly, and as time went on, we hit that granddaddy episode that put him in bed for 2 days, but he informed me later that when he was a child and hurt his back, that he was in bed for almost 2 weeks. So 2 days versus 2 weeks is a much shorter span of time. So, it's something that can work across the board, but you never really know. It's often always a surprise as to what will show up.
Now, Judy, is there a website that people who are listening across the country can go and visit and find out where they can perhaps find out more about this and perhaps even learn or take a class? Absolutely.
The Quantum Touch website, and it's simply www.quantumtouch, one word, that's QUANTUMTOUCH.com. And if they want to get more information from the site, I recommend that they start by clicking the button at the top that says Get Started, and another page will come up, and down the left-hand side of that page, There will be all sorts of links that will take you to different information on the website. But the two I would advise starting with would be the one that says stories, Quantum Touch stories, and testimonials. That's about midway down on that left-hand column. And they'll be able to read about all kinds of stories and all kinds of testimonials from well-respected scientists in the field. So this isn't voodoo or witchcraft. We're working with the very source of that animating energy that we are. Quantum Touch refer to it as the life force. And everyone is hardwired with this. There's no one that's any different than anyone else. We all come in with this, and we all have the ability to use it just as effectively as any other person. Believe me, Dan, if I can learn to do this, anybody can.
Well, Judy, we certainly appreciate you coming on the program today. Very exciting how these times in the healing arena are changing.
And very quickly, gratefully.
Very exciting stuff.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share this time with you. It's been such a pleasure.
You bet. And go ahead and give that website out again.
Yes, the Quantum Touch website is www.quantumtouch.com. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I don't know if it's okay for me to leave my email or phone.
Go ahead and, leave an email address. That'd be good, being that we're a national, i.e. international show. So.
Great. My email address is the initial J, like Judy, that little underscore line, and then my maiden name, M as in Mary, A-R-O-N as in Nancy, at msn.com. So that's J_MARON at msn.com. And I'm happy to talk with folks as long as they'd like me to.
And you heard it here on the Beyond 50 radio program. Judy, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Dan. You have a great day.
You too. We also thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. Also, be sure to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Be sure also to visit us at our blog, where we'll have more information posted for you, as well as archives of this show and others as well. We thank you for joining us. I'm Daniel Davis. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.